The cold, alien wilderness stretched out before him, vast and desolate. The protagonist, a lone explorer in an uncharted system, had seen his fair share of strange planets, but this one felt different, isolated, untouched, and seemingly lifeless. He had come here to catalog the flora and fauna, but instead, he found himself cursing his luck as he trekked deeper into the wilderness. With every step, the feeling of isolation grew heavier. He'd been out here for days, his attempts to contact his ship futile, lost to the interference from the planet's dense atmosphere. Of course, it had to be today, of all days, that he found something unexpected. A glint of violet caught his attention in the distance. Curious, he approached cautiously, expecting perhaps an alien creature, a wildlife sample for his survey. What he found, however, was nothing he had been prepared for: an injured alien woman, sprawled on the ground, unconscious and battered. She was unlike anything he had ever seen. Her skin shimmered in the light, glowing in various shades of purple. Her hair, silver and sleek, cascaded down her back, almost blending in with the strange environment around her. Her face, though delicate, showed signs of severe damage, bruises, cuts, and what appeared to be burns. For a moment, he just stood there, unsure of what to do. But he wasn't in a position to hesitate. His instincts kicked in, and he quickly checked for signs of life. Her breathing was shallow, but steady. Thank the stars. Without thinking too much, he activated the healing module on his wrist, one of his many survival tools. It was advanced technology, nothing he hadn't used before, but when applied to an alien species, that was a whole different ball game. As the healing light enveloped her, he couldn't help but feel a strange mix of guilt and admiration. She looked like she belonged in some mythical tale, beautiful in a way that made his heart skip a beat. But now wasn't the time to be distracted by her otherworldly features. She was barely hanging on. The least he could do was help. It took a few minutes, but soon her breathing steadied, and her eyes fluttered open. For a moment, she simply blinked, as if trying to make sense of her surroundings. She saw him. Her eyes widened. In an instant, she was on her feet, reaching out toward him with a speed that belied her condition. "You saved me," she said, her voice musical yet firm. He stepped back instinctively, unsure of what to make of her sudden movement. Yeah? You were in pretty bad shape. Thought I'd do what I could." Her gaze softened, but there was an intensity in it that made him uneasy. She reached for him, placing a hand on his chest. "You saved me. That means you are my mate now." The words hit him like a ton of bricks. "What?" "No. I mean, I just helped you. It's not—" No, she interrupted, her expression suddenly serious. "You are my mate. That's how it works. In my culture, if someone saves you, they're bound to you forever. I am now yours, and you are mine." He took a step back, confused, but the alien woman remained fixed on him, her eyes searching his face as though there was no other option. Her firm grip on his chest left him wondering if this was some kind of alien bonding ritual. He had read about such customs before, but nothing prepared him for this. Okay, hold on. I think there's been some sort of misunderstanding. I didn't mean to." But she wasn't listening. "It's already decided," she said with a smile that was too confident. "You saved me. You are my mate now. Forever." The protagonist ran a hand through his hair, frustration creeping in. "Look, I didn't sign up for this. I'm just an explorer, out here trying to get some research done." "Then it's perfect," she exclaimed, as though he had agreed with her. "We can go back to my home. I'll introduce you to my people. You will be revered as a hero." I'm not your hero," he muttered under his breath, still trying to process this absurd situation. But it was no use. The alien woman stood firm, undeterred by his protests. She started walking towards him, and he instinctively stepped back. "Wait, hold on. I don't know what you think this is, but I'm not." She cut him off again, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Are you afraid? Afraid of the bond we share now? Afraid?" he repeated, taken aback. No. I'm not afraid, but this is insane. You've got to be kidding me. She closed the gap between them, stepping into his personal space. I'm not kidding. You've saved me, and in doing so, you've accepted me as your mate. We belong together. This wasn't happening. There was no way he could be stuck in a scenario like this, no escape. He rubbed his temples, trying to process the situation. So what exactly does being mates entail, huh? He asked, his tone more sarcastic than he intended. Is it like a ceremonial thing, or are we talking a long-term thing? Because I've got a lot of work to do, and this whole thing, it's kind of throwing off my day. She didn't seem to pick up on his sarcasm. It's forever, she said, her eyes earnest. We are bonded. I have chosen you. No one else could replace you. I am yours. Forever. The air felt thick with tension, and he began to realize there was no talking his way out of this. Whatever this was, whatever she thought was happening, it was way out of his control. And as much as he wanted to protest, something about her intensity made him pause. He wasn't sure what it was, maybe her sheer confidence, or maybe the fact that she was so utterly convinced of this bond that he couldn't help but feel a little intrigued. But the confusion didn't stop. As much as she was talking about being bonded, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was in way over his head. What did mate even mean in this context? Was this a one-sided thing? Was it a cultural misunderstanding? He wasn't sure anymore. Well, he said, trying to regain some sense of control. If I'm your mate now, then what exactly comes next? Her grin was the last thing he expected, a mixture of playfulness and complete seriousness. We begin our bonding rituals. I've waited for this moment my entire life. She reached for his hand, and he had no choice but to let her take it, her touch sending an unexpected shiver down his spine. All right then, he muttered to himself. Let's see where this goes. He wasn't sure how much more of this he could take. The alien woman was relentless, and every time he thought he could break free, she just came up with another ritual. This was becoming unbearable. What was supposed to be a simple rescue mission was turning into some bizarre cultural nightmare. You're a hero, she kept repeating. The bond is sacred. We must complete the rituals now, or the bond will weaken. You don't want that, do you? He shook his head, not sure what was worse, the fact that he was stuck in a strange alien culture, or that he was starting to believe she wasn't joking. The intensity of her beliefs was genuine. It was like she truly couldn't fathom the idea of him not wanting to be her mate. Everything was going too fast. So, he said, trying to keep his tone light despite the growing frustration. What exactly do I have to do? You said there were rituals, right? What do I have to? He trailed off, unsure how to finish the sentence without sounding even more ridiculous than he already felt. She grabbed his hand again, this time holding it firmly. The first ritual is simple, she said with a serious nod. You must share your essence with me. His jaw dropped. Wait. What? Essence? She smiled sweetly. Yes, your essence. Your soul. We must connect on a deeper level. Okay, whoa, hold on. He stepped back, nearly stumbling over a rock. Are you saying I have to, share my soul with you? His eyes widened. I didn't sign up for that. She tilted her head, looking confused. It is a simple ceremony. We exchange energy. You give me part of yourself, and I give you part of me. That is how we bind our spirits. The protagonist was beyond frustrated now. Look, I don't know what you're talking about, okay? I'm just a guy who stumbled across you in the middle of nowhere and helped you out. That's it. I didn't sign up for whatever this is. She stepped closer, her hand still firmly gripping his. But you've already accepted the bond, human. It is done. Now you must fulfill your part of the bond. He opened his mouth to protest, but the look in her eyes stopped him. She was sincere, too sincere. It was like she believed in this with every fiber of her being. She wasn't going to let go, not now, not ever. Listen, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. I'm just trying to understand, okay? All of this is kind of insane. You're talking about what? A lifelong bond? I can't just go along with this. This isn't a typical relationship. It's a whole damn alien culture. The alien woman's expression shifted, confusion turning to determination. It doesn't matter. I've chosen you. You've chosen me. We are bound. And now we must complete the ritual. If you refuse, the bond will break, and I will die. That stopped him cold. Her words hung in the air, each one more serious than the last. The weight of her declaration hit him harder than he expected. She wasn't playing. She wasn't just making a joke or trying to manipulate him. She genuinely believed that by refusing the ritual, she would perish. And the worst part? He wasn't sure if that was true or not. He'd never encountered this species before. He had no idea what their rituals meant or what they could do. She was still holding his hand, her touch firm, warm, and strangely comforting despite the bizarre situation. If we do not complete the ritual, she said softly, I will not be able to live. The bond has already begun. Your actions have already marked us as mates. He stared at her for a moment, trying to process the gravity of the situation. Was this a trap? A weird alien mind game? Or was she really that serious? There was only one way to find out. All right, he said, his voice shaky but resigned. What do I have to do? The alien woman smiled, her eyes sparkling. The first part is simple, we must touch. We share our energy. I will feel your life force, and you will feel mine. She gently placed his hand on her chest, over her heart. His pulse quickened. This was it. He had no idea what would happen, but at this point, it seemed like the only way to figure it out. His mind raced, trying to think of any possible way to back out of this without causing a scene or making things worse. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply. Relax, she whispered. Let go. He hesitated, his heart thumping in his chest, but then he closed his eyes and did as she instructed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a sudden warmth spread from his palm, moving up his arm and through his chest. It was as if he could feel her heartbeat, pulsing through his own body. He opened his eyes and stared at her in shock. What the hell is happening? He whispered. Her eyes fluttered open. You feel it, don't you? Our energies are merging. We are connecting on a deep level. He wanted to pull back. He wanted to scream and run, but there was something about the moment that kept him rooted to the spot. The warmth was oddly calming, and her touch, though intimate, wasn't as terrifying as he had expected. It was peaceful in a way, despite how strange it felt. But that didn't mean he was ready to fully accept this bizarre bond. You're insane, he muttered, but even as the words left his mouth, he couldn't help but feel a twinge of something, a feeling of connection he hadn't expected. It was like her energy was seeping into his own, filling the empty spaces inside him. It felt good. It felt right. The alien woman smiled knowingly. It's okay, human. You are mine and I am yours. We belong together. His heart raced. This was happening. This wasn't some fever dream or hallucination. This alien woman truly believed he was her mate, and everything he did to try to escape only seemed to tighten the bond between them. I didn't agree to this, he muttered, but it was too late. The ritual had already begun. The alien woman's grip tightened, and for a moment, he felt an odd mix of panic and resignation. He had no idea what he had gotten himself into. His mind was racing. This was insane, absolutely insane. He had come out here on a routine mission, never expecting any of this. One moment he was cataloging data, and now? Now he was bonded to an alien woman in the middle of a planet where he couldn't even get a clear signal back to his ship. And what did bonded even mean? He hadn't signed up for this. The alien smiled, her eyes glowing with a fierce intensity. She looked so sure of herself, as if this was as natural as breathing. She wasn't just some alien with a weird idea of what helping meant. She truly believed that they were meant to be together, forever. The way she looked at him, the warmth in her gaze, was far more than he was prepared to deal with. She was happy, and he could sense her excitement bubbling beneath the surface. He forced himself to breathe. This wasn't just a romantic gesture, it was something far more invasive. He wasn't sure if he could handle much more of this bonding stuff, but it seemed like she wasn't going to back off. The worst part was that, somehow, he didn't want to back off. There was a part of him, deep down, that found her confidence almost attractive. Her warmth made him want to stay in her presence. But at the same time, everything about the situation screamed, "Run! You have no idea how long I've waited for this," she whispered. "You are mine now, and I am yours. You saved me. That means you've chosen me, and I've chosen you." He opened his mouth to argue, to point out how crazy this all was, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, all he could do was stare at her. This alien woman, who looked as beautiful as any dream he'd ever had, was speaking to him like this was the most natural thing in the world. The thing was, he couldn't deny there was something about her that felt real. He had expected an over-the-top alien experience, but this felt different. It felt like an undeniable connection, even though it was the most ridiculous thing he'd ever heard in his life. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to shake off the intensity of the moment. "Look, I didn't sign up for any of this. You're beautiful, you're strong, but I'm not your mate. I'm not a part of your culture. This whole thing is just..." "Just what?" she interrupted, tilting her head as though she didn't understand why he would even question it. "You are mine. I know it. You saved me. You healed me. That makes us connected. Our souls are linked now. I'm bound to you." Her certainty left him reeling. He had been in some tough situations before, but this was on a whole different level. He felt trapped in her gaze, her words, everything. There was a tension in the air that made it hard to breathe. Every time he tried to push back, she pulled him further in. She stepped closer, her presence overwhelming. "You have nothing to fear, human," she said softly. "I will never hurt you. You saved me. Now we are linked. You must trust me." Her words should have been reassuring, but instead, they twisted something inside of him. Was it trust he needed? Or was it something else? What if he didn't trust her? What if this whole thing was a mistake? He had no clue how these rituals worked, and every time he tried to process it, the situation felt like it was spiraling further out of control. "Listen," he said, holding up a hand. "I get it. You think we're mates or whatever. But I'm not ready for this, for us." His voice cracked slightly. "You're a part of a culture I don't understand, and this whole thing just feels too fast." She blinked, surprised, but then the smile returned to her lips. "You don't have to be ready. You already are. You've already accepted it. I can feel it. I can feel you." His heart raced as she placed a hand gently on his chest again, just above where his heart beat. The warmth of her touch spread through him, a strange but undeniable sensation. It was impossible to deny that something was happening, something that made his body respond, despite his mind screaming to get out. He wanted to pull away, to demand answers, but when he looked into her eyes he felt almost peaceful. She wasn't pushing, not really. She was waiting for him to catch up. He opened his mouth, intending to say something else, but he was cut off by a sudden realization. He didn't know what to say anymore. All this talk of rituals, energy exchanges, and bonds, it was all starting to feel too real, too tangible. And the worst part was, he wasn't sure he minded. There was a weird pull, a connection that made him feel like maybe he wasn't the one in control anymore. And that was terrifying. "So what happens now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The alien woman's smile softened, and her eyes glowed brighter. "Now we continue. You're mine. I'm yours. And we will never be apart." The finality of her words hit him like a freight train. No escape, no second chances. He was stuck in this bond, this ritual. And worse, he was starting to feel a part of him, that part of him that wanted to fight, that wanted to control the situation, slowly giving way. The pull was real. And as much as he hated to admit it, he couldn't just walk away from it. "You're mine, human," she whispered again, her voice soft but full of that same unwavering certainty. "And I will never let you go." For the first time since meeting her, he didn't respond. He just stood there, her touch still lingering on his chest, as the weight of her words settled around him like a warm blanket. There was no turning back now. And the worst part? He didn't know if he wanted to. The alien woman's presence was now inescapable. Every time he tried to step back, to assert some sort of independence, she closed the distance between them. At first, he thought it was just the weird intensity of the situation getting to him. But now, it felt like something else entirely. Something that he couldn't explain away with simple rationality. He was tied up in this, whether he wanted to be or not. And deep down, part of him did want to be. He rubbed his temples, feeling the pressure of the strange bond that seemed to be pulling at him. It wasn't just her touch, it was everything about her. Her glowing eyes, the way she spoke, the way she felt as if she was woven into his very thoughts. He'd never believed in things like soulmates or fate, but now, he couldn't help but feel like he was caught in something far beyond his control. He tried to shake the thoughts out of his head. He was an explorer, a problem solver, a man who relied on logic and reason. But all of that felt useless against the tidal wave of emotion and strange energy that was coming from her. And the worst part was, she wasn't even being malicious. She was sincere. Her beliefs were real, her intentions pure. But that didn't make this any less overwhelming. "Okay," he finally muttered, trying to regain some semblance of control. "Let's just take it slow. We can figure this out. We can talk about this bond. There's no rush, right?" She didn't seem to hear him. Or maybe she did, but it didn't matter. She was already moving toward him again, her hand reaching for his. There was no hesitation in her movements. It was like she knew exactly what she was doing, and somehow, he felt like he was being drawn along with her. "You're already mine," she said softly, her fingers brushing against his. "I can feel your energy. It's already been given." Her voice was calm, almost soothing. But there was a certainty in her tone that made his skin prickle. It was as if everything that had been said, everything that had happened, was set in stone. There was no escaping it now. She had claimed him. And whether or not he liked it, he was hers. "I don't think you understand," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I never agreed to this. You don't get to just take me. I'm not some prize you win for saving." She didn't flinch. She didn't even seem to be disturbed by his words. She only smiled, her eyes narrowing slightly. "I didn't take you. You gave yourself to me the moment you saved me. The bond is not forced. It is mutual, even if you don't understand it yet. It's a gift. A blessing." He bit back a curse. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He was supposed to be the one in control. He was supposed to be the one making the decisions. But every time he tried to push back, to assert his own will, the pull between them only grew stronger. Her touch, her gaze, the warmth radiating from her, it all made his resolve slip a little further. It was like he was caught in a web, and the more he struggled, the more tangled he became. He had no idea how much longer he could fight it. "Do you know how it feels?" she continued, her voice soft and almost hypnotic. "To be chosen? To know that you belong to someone? To be wanted like this?" He swallowed hard, unable to meet her gaze. Her words had a weight to them. He could feel the truth in them. And even though he wasn't sure how he felt about it, the idea of being wanted, of being needed, it gnawed at him, pulling him in against his better judgment. But he couldn't let himself get lost in it. "I didn't sign up for this," he said again, trying to steel himself. "You think this is some kind of cosmic destiny, but it's not. I didn't choose this. You can't just make me your mate." Her eyes softened, and for a moment she stepped back, as if considering his words. "But you did choose me," she said slowly. "When you saved me. That was the choice. Your actions speak louder than your words. He wanted to argue. He wanted to tell her that he didn't mean for this to happen, that saving her didn't mean he was agreeing to anything. But deep down, he knew she was right. He had acted. He had saved her, and in doing so, he had unknowingly started the bond. But it wasn't supposed to feel like this. He wasn't supposed to be caught in the middle of an alien culture, tangled up in rituals and bonds that he didn't understand. He wasn't supposed to feel like this was out of his hands. But every time he looked at her, every time her gaze met his, that strange pull got stronger. It was impossible to ignore. And as much as he hated to admit it, part of him didn't want to. She stepped closer again, this time her fingers brushing his cheek. I don't want to force you, she said gently. But this is the way of my people. We are meant to be together. I have chosen you, and you have chosen me. You just have to accept it. He closed his eyes, trying to block out her words. I don't want to accept it. But you already have, she said softly, her hand now resting against his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart beneath her fingers. You are mine. I am yours. And that is the way it was always meant to be. He shook his head, but the movement felt more like a reflex than a decision. He didn't know what was happening to him. He didn't know how to stop it. Every time he tried to fight back, the bond grew stronger. And every time she touched him, every time she spoke to him, something inside him crumbled. This wasn't just a physical attraction, it was something deeper. Something he couldn't explain, something that made it impossible to separate himself from her. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't break free. She had already marked him. And he couldn't pretend like it didn't matter. Because somehow it did. I don't know what to do, he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Her lips curled into a smile, and she placed a soft kiss on his forehead. You don't have to do anything. Just be with me. Be mine. I am yours forever. And in that moment, despite every instinct screaming at him to run, he felt something inside him shift. It wasn't resignation. It wasn't defeat. It was acceptance. For the first time since meeting her, he finally let himself believe it. Maybe he was hers. And maybe, just maybe, he was starting to feel like that wasn't such a bad thing after all.